Good afternoon. We're going to just take a few minutes here and introduce ourselves while the remaining interested people arrive. This campus always ran 10 minutes after the hour, and never mind we changed that. Some of us are still tied to that. Welcome. My name is Samir Bitar, and I am the Arabic Language and Culture lecturer, and I'm very happy that you are all here with us this afternoon. I came to Montana 42 years ago, and yes, I am Muslim. And I hold many posts currently. I am with the language department. I'm also Assistant Director of Outreach for the Central and Southwest Asian Studies Center. I'm a guest lecturer with the Center for Jerusalem Studies, where in the summers I have the opportunity to take Grizzlies for intensive Arabic in the Holy Land. I'm a curricula specialist with the Defense and Critical Language Program. I have the honor and privilege of training our Montana National Guard before they deploy. And last summer, I had the honor and privilege of training our special troops. When I talk about training, I'm basically talking language and culture. And I will talk more about my experience here in Big Sky Country as we start the presentations. So now I'll pass the mic to my colleague, and he will do the same.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming here. For you guys at the back, can you hear us fine? Just give us a thumbs up. All right. So my name is Jamil Chaudhry. I've been working on this campus as the university architect since 1995. And I can kind of feel dated when I look around some of the campus and see young men and women here who were with my two daughters. So Khadija sitting right here in the front, she was with my youngest daughter, and they're now seniors and about to graduate. So I've had pretty much my whole adult career and all of my children's growing up period all the way through college during this phase of time. So I've spent half my life overseas, growing up in Kenya, 2 years in Finland, and then the other half of my life, about 27 years or so, living in the United States, the last 21 of which has been right here in Missoula, Montana. So I'm an immigrant, so I have that as a background. I'm a naturalized citizen, which I actually did right here in Missoula at the downtown federal courthouse. So that was quite a nice moving ceremony. For those of you who've never done that, that's quite an interesting event. We both have a kind of a different tack on Muslims in Montana. So Samir is going to talk quite a lot more about his own personal journey coming from Palestine and his experiences here, and I've got a slightly different tack. So it'll be the experience is more of political nature and cultural nature for Muslims lately. So, Samir, do you want to get going?
Yes. Thank you very much, Jamil. I would like to start out by thanking Central and Southwest Asia Studies Center and the World Affairs Council for bringing us together today. And of course, I always am thankful for the University of Montana for providing us with the venue to come together and talk about these issues. Assalamu alaikum, ayyuha sayyidatu wa sada. Peace be upon you, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom, hafirim bihavirot. What you heard is the Muslim greeting, which symbolizes actions of the Islamic faith. It is my honor and privilege to be with you here this afternoon. Allow me to kindly start by thanking God for enabling me to carry my work on earth. I would like to thank my family, and especially my wife, for all the love and support. Last but not least, I would like to offer sincere thanks to all of you for joining us today. I come from a very large family. I am a refugee, an immigrant, a naturalized American, and I am Palestinian by birth and experience. What you see there is my mother's side of the family. She's one of 12. My father, God bless his soul, is one of 14. So I have several hundred first cousins. Can you find Waldo on the picture? I am sitting on my dad's lap. I did have hair back then. This is the nuclear family, my father and mother. I am Samir, and I'm sitting in Samira's lap. Arabic is gender sensitive. And I am the black sheep of the family. I am Palestinian by birth and experience, American by naturalization and experience, and most of all, and closest to my heart, I am Montanan by residence. I came to Big Sky Country at age 16 as a freshman in college. I received all my higher education here in Montana. I'm a Montana product and proud of it. I mentioned I am a refugee, I am an immigrant, and in the words of a dear Palestinian colleague who is a stand-up comic, she's a very nice lady, she says, if we have an oppression marathon, Olympic, I would definitely be a finalist. I grew up in Jerusalem in the Muslim tradition. I got my basic education at St. George, a British school run by the Anglican Church. I grew up in a multicultural, multi-religious, multilinguistic, and multi-ethnic society. I'm a polyglot, I speak several languages, and languages opens doors. My wife is native Montanan. We have been married 35 years. What you're looking at is Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, where I was born and raised until age 16, when I came to Big Sky Country. This is my school, St. George, and next to me is a grizzly from Hamilton. For the summers of 2013 and 2014, I had the honor and privilege of taking grizzlies with me to Jerusalem, where I served as a lecturer at the Center for Jerusalem Studies. It's nice to make a full circle. I'm standing in front of my elementary school with one of my college students. There's Samir, my wife Barbara. We have 2 children, Jinan and Ramsey. Our children were born and raised in Montana in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multilingual home. We move the clock a little fast. You see my son, he's 6'3". He's all the milk with enzymes in Montana. I grew up on goat milk, 5'5". Montana cow milk, 6'3", 205 pounds. We're very proud of our children. They're also alums from the University of Montana. My daughter is doing her doctorate in higher education at UCLA. My son is a respiratory therapist at Community Hospital. You know, Islam is an Arabic word. Oh, this slide. So I am a northern light, a bobcat, and a grizzly. And, all the people, oh, you are all that, and they want to give me a hard time. And the answer is very simple. At the end of the day, I'm always a winner. Can you beat that? Okay, now we get to the serious stuff. And Islam is at the heart of all these subjects we are talking about. Islam is an Arabic word that is derived from a three-consonant root that means peace. It is also translated as submission. There is submission to the self to the teachings of God in order to realize personal peace with and within one's own existence. The true message of Islam is to find peace within yourself. You align yourself with all that God loves and stay away from all that God does not love. This peace within the self shall permeate from the individual to the family, friends, and the society at large. Allah is the proper noun in the Arabic language for God. This Arabic noun is very unique because it does not have a plural or a gender. It is the noun used by Arab Jews, Christians, and Muslims for God, the one and only. The following are names of God in different languages. Yahuwah, Dios, good. Dio, Khoda, Theos. And Allah is the word for God in Arabic. Muslims, like Christians and Jews, believe in the one God, the one and only, the creator and the sustainer of the universe. Thus, Islam is not a new religion. At its core, it conveys the same guidance and message that Allah revealed to all the prophets He sent mankind. Here I'm going to quote from the Holy Book. Say, we believe in Allah and in what has been revealed to us and what was revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants. And in the books given to Moses, Jesus, and all other prophets from their Lord. We make no distinction between one and another among them. And to Allah we surrender ourselves. Quran chapter 3, verse 84. Muslims also believe in angels, heaven, hell, and the judgment day. Islam, among the monotheistic religions, combines the original and the final revelation of the God of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them. To worship Allah is to know Him, love Him, and act upon His guidance in all aspects of life. To serve Him by serving mankind. Again, I will quote from the Holy Book. True piety does not consist in turning your faces towards the east or the west, but truly pious is he who believes in God, the last day, the angels, the revelation, and the prophet. And to spend out of your sustenance, out of love for Him, for your kin, for orphans, for the needy, for the wayfarer, for those who ask, and for the freeing of human beings from bondage, to be steadfast in prayer and renders the purifying dews. And truly pious are they who keep their promises when they promise, and are patient in misfortune and hardship and in time of peril. It is they that have proved themselves true, and it is they who are conscious of God. Quran chapter 2, verse 177. What you're looking at is the 5 pillars of Islam. And given the time restriction, I'm not really going to go into the details of the 5 pillars of Islam, but they are 1, the declaration of faith, 2, prayers, 3, fasting the month of Ramadan, 4, zakat, and that's giving alms, okay? And for that, every Muslim has to give 2.5% of one net savings on which a year has passed as a religious duty, and a purifying sum which will be spent on the poorer sections of community, and there anybody in the community. And fifth is the pilgrimage to Mecca. You know, Islam is a religion of peace, compassion, equality, reason, and justice, all of which are not adequately represented in our media. Prophet Muhammad advocated equal treatment of males and females. He encouraged education from the cradle to the grave. This is when they break the fast in Ramadan. That's where we get the word breakfast, break the fast. These are the alms, the monies. Somebody will say, well, that's like socialism. I go, it is spreading the wealth. It's very human. And this is the Kaaba. The Grand Mosque holds around 2.5 million people. It is the largest congregation on the globe. This picture is for everybody to see that the head cover is part of tradition, belief, culture, and it is present everywhere. Is Islam tolerant or intolerant of other religions? You know, despite the recent examples of ISIS, the Taliban, and various clashes between Muslims and Christians in Pakistan, Indonesia, Nigeria, Sudan, historically Islam has an extended record of tolerance over the centuries. The Quran unmistakably and formidably states that there is no compulsion in religion. Quran, chapter 2, verse 256. And that God has created many nations and peoples. Many verses in the Holy Book emphasize the diversity of humankind. Quote, O humankind, we have created you male and female and made you nations and tribes so that you might come to know each other. Quran, chapter 49, verse 13. So the diversity and the plurality of humankind is in the Quran. It is one of the first things Allah teaches us. Muslims, like Christians and Jews, believe that they have been called to a covenant with their Creator, and collectively they constitute a community of believers intended to serve as an example to other nations in establishing a just society. And here is what I would like to say. There is no requirement to set up an Islamic state. Muslims are required to set up a just state. Muslims also regard Christians and Jews as people of the book, people who have received a scripture from God. The Quran recognizes that the three Abrahamic faiths, the descendants of Abraham, share a common belief in the one God, in biblical prophets, such as Moses and Jesus, peace be upon him, in human accountability, and in final judgment followed by eternal reward or punishment. Quote, surely the believers and the Jews, Christians, and Sapiens, between brackets, Sapiens are Middle East groups traditionally recognized by Islam as having a monotheistic orientation. Whoever believes in God and the last day, and whoever does right, shall have his reward with the Lord, and will neither have fear or regret. The Quran, chapter 2, verse 62. You're looking at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where the grave of Jesus Christ is, and where last Saturday the light came out from his grave. I have witnessed that growing up in Jerusalem. And the most incredible thing about the Saturday of Light is the light that comes out and is spread all over the church does not burn you. It doesn't burn. It's an awesome experience. Of course, I'm a Muslim, but I grew up, my classmates were Assyrian, Armenian, Christians of different affiliations, and my childhood BFF was Assyrian. And we spent time going to the Church of Holy Sepulchre together to light candles for Jesus. Here I'd like to move and talk about personal experiences as a Muslim in Montana. You know, I was born into a Muslim family. However, I grew up in the holy city of Jerusalem, where the three monotheistic religions are practiced and the affiliations are diverse. Being Palestinian, our national plight resided in the forefront of our identity. Religion was and is secondary. I spent a lot of time with Palestinian Muslims and Palestinian Christians alike. Growing up in the holy city, I often visited the Church of Holy Sepulchre. With my Assyrian childhood friend. And usually after going there, we would head to Al-Aqsa Mosque, where we wrestled on the fine carpet until the groundskeeper got our attention saying, "Boys, it's prayer time." I arrived in Havre, Montana at age 16 in the fall of 1974. Soon it dawned on me that I am a Muslim and everyone else is Christian or not. A thought and a feeling I did not experience growing up. I was the only Muslim in my community. However, at the time, in the 70s, religion and Islam were not part of the American discourse, like they are and have been since 9/11 and the wars that followed. As I started to make friends and socialize, the subject of religion came up, and the most common question, if not the question, how do you feel about Christians? For me, Samir, given the way I was raised, in my association with Christians all my life, the answer was easy. Religion is between you and your maker. 2, in Islam, we believe in all the prophets, starting with Adam to the completion of the message with Muhammad, peace be upon him. 3, Muslims believe in all scriptures before the Quran revealed to Moses and Jesus. 4, in the Quran, Muslims are directed to protect people of the book, namely the Jews and the Christians. 5, Islam builds on the 2 monotheistic religions that preceded it. Thus, I am at peace with Christians. And today I can say, ask my wife, she's Catholic. One of the first of the hardest experiences was when the fasting month of Ramadan arrived. I grew up fasting, and I'm not sure how to go about it now that I'm in Havre, Montana, 40 miles from the Canadian border, where the Border Patrol can come and get me. They operate within 100-mile distance from the border. So I called Mom for guidance, and she said, "Samir, when a Muslim is in a faraway land, he is an ambassador, and you would make a great one. May Allah be with you. I will help you through the month." What comforted me more and gave me confidence in my belief and strengthened my faith in Allah was I received great news from the cafeteria at Northern Montana College that I can start working with them. With that, my food to break the fast with is already in place for me to carry out the worship. I say that because the logistics of having the meal to break the fast at the end of the day would have been rather complex if I didn't have direct access to the food when I needed it. Allah is truly with me. What proved to be awkward was the interaction with classmates and friends with whom I assimilated and developed certain routines and habits, like hugging, kidding around, smoking cigarettes between classes, etc. Now it's Ramadan, and I am not smoking. So when they inquired why I wasn't going out for breaks, I answered saying, well, I'm trying to cut back. Oh. Next came greeting and hugging, which, if one is fasting, hugging the opposite sex is disastrous, for it will break the fast. Thus, I developed a cold. Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather. So best not hug, don't even get close. However, this got old fast. So after a week of making excuses and avoiding close contact, I shared with all that I'm fasting. My friends thought it was neat, and a good number of them shared with me why the pilgrims came on the Mayflower and how the freedom of religion is part of the US Constitution. That made me feel great and sparked my interest in learning more about the Constitution. To sum up what I have shared thus far, I can confidently say that during the 70s, being a Muslim in America was not an issue at all, and the reception was pleasant, since the community at hand wished to learn about Islam, not question it like it is today. In comparison, and what was an issue and highly controversial was talking about Palestine, since the community, which, like the rest of America, had already taken a position on the issue. This to me was highly flawed, since they were exposed to only one side of the conflict, namely the Jewish plight, along with utter disregard to Palestinian rights. Another very important factor that greatly affected the attitude and responses of the community then in reference to being Muslim versus Palestinian was and is. The questions related to Islam came after the community members met me, got to know me, knew me from others, and thus viewed me for the human I am, who happens to be Muslim. When it came to being Palestinian, the human factor was not there, because the media in the US constantly dehumanizes the Palestinians. They are portrayed as either refugees or terrorists. And most of all, the inquiry came with a preconceived position and attitude. Thus, it proved to be very controversial and caused me to be very disheartened by this general attitude I had to deal with. The way Islam and Muslims are viewed today is not what I experienced when I first came to Big Sky Country. Today, it is hostile, thanks to all the negative media and biased representations of Islam and Muslims to the American population. In the meantime, I was learning more about the Constitution and the American way. So I exercised my right to my opinions and shared with all that their position towards Palestine is un-American, since they only know one side of the story. And such an attitude, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, falls under the definition of prejudice. So that was the 70s. Late 70s, and for most of the 80s, the question changed from, are you Palestinian Muslim, to, are you Iranian? To which I responded, no, emphatically. And with all true honesty, having people come up to me out of nowhere, at random, asking was and is disturbing, aside from being un-American. However, it enabled me to develop further understanding of the following statements, which I hear often. I've been to 14 countries and 22 states. And when I travel abroad, I hear the following two statements. One, American democracy stops at their borders. Two, Americans seem to have double standards. In the 80s, I moved with my wife, who was born in Fort Benton, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where I worked as a civil structural engineer on projects for the royal family. There, I experienced a much different Muslim community from the one I was raised in. This brings us to a very important concept for all to understand. Islam, the revelation, the message is one. However, Muslims are very diverse. The formula here is Islam is a constant. And you can see it on the screen. And then Islam as a constant mixed with a culture. And the cultures vary. So we have a constant mixing with a culture. The result is also a variable. So basically what Samir is asking all is, you want to understand Islam? Please study Islam, not Muslims, which is what's happening right now. There is 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide. So let's say that there's 200,000 terrorists and extremists. You do the math. That's less than 1%. Is it logical to take the characteristics of less than 1% and ascribe it to the other 99%? As an American, I would say, no, that's absurd. That's like that's analogous to someone coming to the US, looking into an offshoot from Christianity like KKK, and decides, oh, that's Christianity. They're all like that. To which all Americans would say, absurd. Defective thinking. You know, in the 90s, the American discourse was focused on Saddam Hussein and Yasser Arafat. Islam and religion was not an issue. It is very intriguing how the American discourse flip-flops. In the 70s, are you Palestinian? In the 80s, are you Iranian? In the 90s, are you Iraqi or Palestinian? After 9/11, it became more or less all of the above. Plus, are you Muslim? Followed by, are you Sunni or Shia? These questions being fielded and coming across with a negative attitude. Comparing this to my initial experience when the inquiry was genuine, I would say the inquiry now is hostile, and it is not motivated by curiosity, but rather hidden biases and lazy misconceptions, accompanied by a preconceived position and attitude. Everything changed after 9/11. At the time, I had more than a half a dozen speaking engagements during the following weeks. Everyone wanted me to visit and explain, shed light on what happened. As Americans, our diversity is one of our nation's strengths. I'm proud to be an American, and I'm very proud of my heritage. I'm going to close this portion of my presentation because I would like to just touch on the ban and then move to my colleague. I will close this portion of my presentation with a pledge. As a man of faith and an educator, I seek to thwart a culture of fear for a culture of love and hope. I commit myself to nurturing a spirit of love and hope in relation to the greatest gift given to us all, the gift of life and health. In conclusion to my first portion, I vow not to surrender my truths and beliefs for fear and hatred. The real enemy is fear, and fear creates hatred, and hatred begets hatred, and then it turns into violence. And that's what we are seeing. Since I'm on that, I'd like to share with everybody something I've been sharing with almost everybody I get to interact with, and this just came up this week. You know, we're accustomed to asking each other, how are you? Now I recommend to all my fellow Americans to ask each other, how are you today? Add that word today. It makes all the world of difference. Because if we ask people right now, how are you, and stop with that open-ended question, I guarantee you half of us will start crying. So add one word. How are you today? We can deal with that. Okay. You know, the band, you know which band I'm talking about. You know, very briefly, these actions by President Trump confirm fears by many that the diverse and bigoted rhetoric witnessed during the presidential campaign is already leading to devastating policies. The actions taken by President Trump have nothing to do with national security. They are based off Islamophobia, which is a misnomer, and xenophobia. A safe America stands by its core principles, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's what makes us strong. We live up to our highest values, and we embrace others in our American melting pot as one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our country was founded on the principles of freedom of religion, a tradition and ideal that forms the foundation of our country. We do not tell people how to pray, and we do not ban people based on their religion. 2, no one should fear for their safety because of the color of their skin, what language they speak, or how they pray. Hate must not beget hate. Violence must not beget violence. We need more love and less fear. And third and last, we are stronger when we come together as Americans and weaker when we let fear and lack of understanding come between us. America is deeply rooted in its ability to come together. We as Americans have this. United we stand, divided we fall. Thank you very much.
Maybe what we could do is have questions after my presentation rather than have questions directly to Samir right now. That way we can kind of get the whole presentation over and done with, and then collectively have questions both to Samir and myself. So for those who came in a little bit later, my name is Jamil Chaudhry. I've been the university architect here since 1995. So as such, I'm not an academic, I'm not a professor, I don't sit in front of a class of students every day lecturing and reading publications and papers. My job is actually designing and getting things built, you know, so working in the real life, as I would like to say it. Nothing against academics. So anyway, since I was given my task of talking about Muslims in America, Samir, if you can help me just put my PowerPoint on.
Yes, I'm sure.
It's on. There you go. Just do slideshow. There you go. So that's the kind of poster that kind of has been around for the last 2 years, I believe. My Montana includes Muslims, and that's kind of what the topic of today's talk really has been. So, as I said, since I'm not an academic, I kind of figured since, you know, if you're given a paper, what everyone's first thing is to do is to hit Google and type in, you know, Muslims in Montana, and lo and behold, you should have like 7 million hits, right? Well, no, you don't. You don't hardly get anything. What you do end up with is newspaper articles, opinions, editorials about the recent anti-Muslim sentiments, anti-refugee sentiments, but no historical data about when did Muslims come here? How many Muslims are there? What did they do in this state? Any of the history. There's just literally nothing. So I started panicking. It's like, how am I supposed to write this thing if I can't even research it myself? So hooked up with some friends at the Mansfield Library. They have the special collections, right? Surely there's something in the special collections about early Muslim pioneers to the mining cities of Butte and Montana, right? There was masses of immigrants there. Surely there's history about some of those immigrants being Muslim. They can't all have been Irish and Italian or Chinese, right? There's got to have been some Middle Easterners there. And nothing. There's just nothing written up. So for those who are looking for a unique opportunity to research that nothing's been done before, I've got a paper ready for you guys to research. Muslims in Montana, so go at it. What I was able to find was a paper, and this is on JSTOR at the Mansfield Library's database. It's written by Arif Gayur. He wrote a paper back in 1981 titled Muslims in the United States. So settlers and visitors, still not Montana, but about as good as I could get. So back in 1981, this gentleman had done a very extensive research about Muslims in Montana. Who are they? Where did they come from? What are their backgrounds? What are their nationalities? And what was interesting is, you can kind of see where he's drawn it out ethnic background by ethnic background. And you don't see the highlights, so I'll kind of just point it out to you. The Syrians. There was 140,000 Syrians back in 1980. All of this fuss about Syrians right now, there were already 140 back in 1980. And look at the other highlighted portion that I wanted to show. Used to be small groups at Butte, Montana. So, it's small, but I had my hallelujah moment right there. It's like, found it. It doesn't say how many there were. It doesn't say that there were others from Indonesia, the other parts of the Middle East, whatever. But at least we do know that some existed in Butte, Montana. Of course, nowadays what we have is, back then, 1980, about 1.2 million. And there's a breakdown. In today's time, there's estimates between 6 and 7 million Muslims. And there's a big increase after 1980. And every one of the researchers say that it was caused a lot by the liberalization of the immigration laws of 1965. Before that, if you start reading up about it, a lot of the immigration laws were based upon selective immigration. There's language about encouraging white immigrants. It says it quite specifically, white immigrants. And several of the papers I was looking at even kind of I could get a chuckle, where some of the Middle Easterners Arabs were trying to pass themselves off as white. So go into the INS offices back then and say, hey, I'm white, I've fallen under this law. Well, it was kind of interesting. But after 65, there was a lot more openness in immigration from all parts of the world. And so I would say most of the immigrants right now, beyond being Arab, Iranian, are actually more from the Far East, the Near and Far East, mainly India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, those kind of places. So historically, if you go back, I think everyone's pretty clear in the sense that the first Muslim immigrants to America were undoubtedly African slaves. So the first Muslims that came here didn't come as immigrants or voluntarily. They were brought here in chains. It's probably not a well-known fact, but I think researchers, including Alex Haley of Roots fame, have estimated several thousand of the millions of African slaves that were brought were definitely Muslims. But because of the forced livelihood that they endured, the religion was pretty much stamped out of them, so their religion and their culture did not survive. In recent decades, you've got many African Americans who have converted to Islam, although if you ask them, a lot of them will probably say we're coming back or rediscovering our Islam. So it's not like something new that they're converting, they're trying to rediscover their roots. So locally, I couldn't find anything in Montana that really said, well, the first Muslims came at this time or, whatever, other than that small article. Probably in recent memories, my colleague Samir is probably one of the first ones here. He's been around since the dinosaur age, I think. A lot of it since the Second World War has been concentrated around universities. The Muslim Student Associations kind of started nationwide right after the Second World War in the early 50s. And mostly on college campuses. Like I said, there's a lot of international Muslim students that migrated to the US to study. They were sent over by their respective countries that were newly independent. If you take a look at the historical world map in the 50s, 60s is when most of the world became independent from their colonial masters, and they were in desperate need of professionals, educated folks that could come back and move their national economy forward. So they were sending a lot of their young boys and girls over here to study. So the Muslim Student Association became very common, and virtually every major college has a chapter. So it is in Montana. We have a MSA chapter both in Missoula and Bozeman at UM and MSU respectively, where we've got sufficient numbers of Muslim students that formed it. Samir and I have both been active faculty caretakers of the MSA during our respective years here. And the MSA has typically been a spot where not only the students, but whoever are Muslims in the local community can kind of come together and get a community feeling, can at least celebrate the Eid prayers, can do the fasting together, can do the prayers together. So while the number of Muslim students kind of ebb and wane, finding a count on the permanent resident Muslims in Montana is a rather difficult issue. So for a census and for everything else, we've got to differentiate students who are non-resident, non-US citizens from the local permanent residents that are either having a green card or a full American citizenship. So it's important to keep those two numbers in mind. For Montana, where we've got so few numbers, it's kind of confusing or a little bit not correct. When you come to Missoula or Bozeman, you can get the impression, oh, well, we've got so many Muslim-looking people. Well, that's just on campus. Those students are here today and gone tomorrow. In some years, you've got a good amount of Muslim students coming. Next year, we might not have any. So those numbers are really fluctuating. The number of permanent residents, just anecdotally, I would have said maybe about 500 or so, just as a guess in the entire state. The only thing I could really find, research-wise, believe it or not, came from an Iranian Times source. So it's kind of hilarious, but what they estimated was about 34, sorry, pressed the wrong button, right there. So about 34 per 100,000. So the states of Montana, Vermont, and Hawaii in the United States have the fewest number of Muslims. So, and of those three, Montana itself has the fewest number. So if we're at the last count, we're about 1 million people in the state of Montana. That means that our total Muslim count is around 340. So it kind of jives with what I've experienced in the 20 years of living here and traveling around the state, that there's not that many of us. You could literally count them on two hands in just Missoula as the permanent families here. So say somewhere between 300 and 500 is the number that we're talking about. So given the extremely low numbers of resident Muslims in Montana, what one wonders reading the press and the news, let's forget even nationally, just locally in the state of Montana, what is all the fuss about, right? I mean, you can start wondering, what is the damn fuss about? 300 to 500. Well, it's a question Muslims have been asking themselves and progressives have been trying to figure out for the last 2-3 years. But somehow Missoula, Montana, or I should probably expand it to Western Montana, has become ground zero, not only nationally, but internationally, in the anti-Muslim, anti-refugee political debate. We've had news reporters from national and international organizations interviewing proponents and opponents of the issue for the last 2 years. I mean, my wife is here, Maria. She's the director of international exchange programs. She and I have been interviewed by national folks here, the AP, Reuters, and also Swedish newspapers and all that. So it's kind of funny for Swedish newspapers to be sending people here. And if you take a look at BBC, the #1 most viewed video is about Western Montana and the anti-Muslim, anti-refugee situation. So it kind of blows your mind that how is it that we here have become so big internationally? And I'll circle back around to that. So I think everyone knows where the whole story started, and I'll go away from my notes and kind of ad-lib it from here. Missoula, Montana, there was a group of concerned citizens. The picture you're seeing there is Mary Poole. She's the one of the founding members of Soft Landing Missoula, SLM, which was formed to try and help absorb refugees. So this all started in the fall of 2015 when worldwide images were coming through of the mass migration of Syrian refugees, and along with the Syrians, there's a lot of other North Africans and West Africans and Afghani refugees that were fleeing across Turkey, getting onto boats, getting into Greece, and then land migration across through Yugoslavia, Austria, and ending up either at Austria, Germany, or Scandinavia, mostly Sweden. So that set of images that went on and on for a good part of a month, I think pretty much captivated the whole world. And what it did is it triggered a huge response and counter-response. The response from the progressives is, how can we help? We've got no one that we're really taking. Germany's taking more than 1 million people. Sweden's taken, tens of thousands. And then the question came, well, why are the Europeans taking? Why aren't the Muslim countries taking? Well, if you take a look at that, Turkey, which is right on the border with Syria, has about 3 to 5 million refugees that they're holding in camps, and they've been holding them in camps for 6 years. And that's a country economically about, a 20th, a 30th, a 50th the size, economic size and power of this country. Look at Jordan, how many million they're holding, on top of the millions of Palestinians, Samir's background, that had immigrated there for the past 50, 60 years. So Lebanon, a tiny country, it's about the size of Hamilton and Missoula combined. I exaggerate, but it's a really tiny country. They've got millions of refugees. So, everyone's doing their part. The United States at that time said, this was during Obama's time, said that 60,000 refugees is the amount that the United States was going to be able to take per year worldwide from anywhere around the world, 60,000. And then after the Syrian crisis, he upped that number to 85,000. Again, from proponent side, maybe not enough. From the opponent side, this was tantamount to declaring war. So when this local group got together and started seeing those images and started saying, okay, well, how can we help? Can we absorb some of the refugees here in Missoula, Montana? They approached the city council, the mayor, and the county commissioners. They got a positive response. The plan went ahead. And as soon as neighboring counties got wind of that, this happened. I think a lot of you were here during the spring of 2016 when Ravalli County commissioners got together and said, hey, Missoula's doing that. We can't have any of that. So they had a quickly formed town hall meeting. About 500 people came together there. I was not there. But it was a pretty one-sided show. There were some folks, of course, from the local area that were saying that yes, we should take in refugees, but the vast majority of them were opposed to it. Now, if the discussion was just anti-refugees and talking, facts, figures, and pros and cons, I think it would have been fine. For the longest time, for those who know me, I've been staying out of it. I keep saying, not my fight, not my fight. Don't get involved, right? But things were said during that meeting that it came to a head to me personally, and it's like I said, I can't take this anymore. So a lot of statements are born out of fear. Some of them are just purely a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge, a lack of curiosity. But this gentleman here, and for those of you who want to see the rest of the article, they're all on the Missoulian.com. So these are just screenshots. This gentleman was holding up the Quran saying, in the Quran it's written that non-believers are going to be attacked and killed, so we can't have Muslims here. In their holy book it says that, that when they come here they're going to kill us. Other people were saying they're going to come here and rape your women. Others were not all terrorists are Muslims, but all Muslims are terrorists. There's some more choice things that I'm forgetting, but by and large, I think everyone got the message there that the refugees were not welcome, and Muslims in particular were even less welcome. The fear was that if Missoula got refugees, then surely some of those were going to be planted in Hamilton. And lo and behold, we can't have any of that. They're going to disturb our nice community and disturb us, and this is not going to fly. Similar event happened north of us in Flathead County. And in response to that, a lot of local people started getting really more involved in the pro-refugee movement, many more than if the counter-protests had not happened, me in particular. So I came out with the impression after that whole thing that my faith is being demonized, my whole culture is being demonized. These are refugees. These are true people who are fleeing warfare, fleeing persecution. They are fleeing for their life. For everyone who has any kind of understanding, I think as a refugee, it is your last choice to leave your country. Why would you? You have your home. You've got your whole family, your culture, your children, your grandparents, all of your property, everything you've worked for forever is there. So why would you leave it? I mean, what would make you leave it? And the choice is very clear. It's because you fear death. You fear imminent death. So people leave with nothing more than a suitcase or a bundle on their heads, whatever they can carry with them. So in the spring, there was a very large group, a fairly wide group of organizations, of NGOs, from Soft Landing to Salam, which Samir and I are part of. Salam stands for Standing Alongside America's Muslims, to Montana Human Rights Watch, to Empower Montana, to Jeanette Rankin Peace Center, you name it. This seemed to be a coalescing of local progressive groups who felt, enough's enough, we need to get together. And a rally was held at Caras Park. Organizers like us were thinking, we'll be lucky if we get 400 or 500 people, and lo and behold, 1,000 people showed up. And in typical Missoulian fashion, the 20, 30 people who were protesting, they got their picture on the front page. The other 950 were proponents. They're kind of in the background. But anyway, the article was fairly well written. I was fortunate enough to be one of the speakers, and in that whole thing, not the gentleman in front with his obvious postcard or his poster of what he's complaining about, but one of the guys at the back. I don't know whether you can see that, but basically he had a poster saying, "No Muslims in Montana." So I started off my speech and I looked up at him and it just said, okay, hell with my speech. It's like, so I had to point him out and said, buddy, you're too late. We're already here. And we've been here for decades. So I don't know what gives you the right to say no Muslims in Montana, but you're way out of line. Of course, the crowd got a good roar and laughter out of it, and I continued my speech. But that has still stuck with me, and the whole kind of sentiments. So we see similar sentiments kind of keep repeating, as things kind of go in a different direction, the response kind of changes. Following, there have been many, many more discussions and articles, and really in Montana, like I said, we're famous worldwide because once these kind of stories and articles hit the internet, there's a lot of worldwide attention that kind of comes with it. And this one was done by the AP, no less. And once the AP picks it up, it goes even further internationally. They did an article about the situation in Montana where it's neighbor versus neighbor. And that's basically what it is, I've been asked many times, you've been here for 20 years, so what's up? And I said, it never used to be this way. We've been hiking, skiing, swimming, kayaking, rafting all over. Never an issue, never one issue. Even after 9/11, not one issue. We had friends coming to us saying, hey, if anything happens, come talk to us. If you want refuge, we'll open up our house to you. But there was never an incident. But over the last 2-3 years, it's changed. It's changed a lot. And it's changed all over Western Montana, I would say. It's changed all over the United States. It's neighbor versus neighbor. There's nothing as polarizing probably as the refugee question, number one, and the Muslim question, number two. Before I get there, so one of the things that we've been kind of discovering is that after the SLM got formed, the Soft Landing Missoula, what the next step they had to do in order to actually get refugees here was to form, to be able to have one of the 9 federally appointed contractors that is legally able to handle refugees to relocate to Missoula. And by relocate, the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, was here in the 1970s. They resettled about 550 Hmong families. So those folks that you see out at the farmers market, they're the Hmongs. They've been here since the 1970s, early 80s. So 550 of them got resettled. And so if you start thinking about that, that's 550. And back then, I think there was a similar scare. As American troops withdrew from Vietnam, there was a big fear. We're going to have the whole of Vietnam, South Vietnam, coming to the United States. And reading some of the research, historical data back then, there was an equal amount of opponents who were wanting to stop Vietnamese refugees coming here as there are now the number of people who are opposing any resettlement of any refugees into America. But anyway, IRC did come over. They were pleased with the amount of local support for the refugees. They found that there's enough of a base here, and the local city council and county commissioners are in support of it, so they went ahead. And with that, we started getting our first refugees. And if you guys know anything about refugees, you don't get to choose who you get. The refugees don't get to pick which country they go to. They don't get to pick which state or city they go to. All of these matters are with the federal contractors. They say, okay, you and you, you're all families, you get to go there, they're next in line. So it was that we got the first refugees, and lo and behold, they were not Syrian, they were not Muslim. There were 10 families from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Were they Muslim? No, they were Christian. Did we get any love out of the opponent? No. It was the same message. Now the message morphed. The message was, okay, now you're bringing Africans here. There's no local support for them. The message was they're uneducated. They don't know how to speak English. They speak French. They speak Swahili. How are they going to manage here? How are they going to get jobs? So they're very nimble on their feet. The rhetoric changes, and you've just got to be nimble enough to respond. The next set of refugees we did get were from Iraq and some from Syria also. So now we do have some Muslims, and so now it's back to the anti-Muslim situation. And it goes on a little bit further because in the current legislative session, we're getting some anti-Muslim things. I think every one of you has heard about the Sharia law. It's not called the Sharia law, it's called banning foreign law. So this was proposed by this fine state representative from Kalispell, who he says he was just representing his constituents. That's all he was doing. It's not anything personal. He was just representing his constituents. Of course, he could have told his constituents this is not anything that legally you can have. Foreign laws being enacted in our state or our country where state law and federal law is paramount. But it was presented that no foreign law should be able to be used in this state. All of the proponents of that bill, 90% of them just talked about Sharia law. They don't want Sharia law enacted in the state. So it passed out of committee, it passed the House, it passed the Senate. Fortunately, Bullock vetoed it, so it's not law. But essentially, a lot of the proponents were saying, well, we need it because there's Muslims here, and once they get to be in sufficient enough numbers, they will enact Sharia law on their own, and we can't have that. So Samir and I, we've been two Muslims here. I guess we've had Sharia law in Montana for 30, 40 years, I guess. You know, we just didn't know it. There's also been really good articles to the letter, to the editorial. This one here was Sharia law is no threat to Montana. It's a very well-written thing. It's basically outlining the fact that it's a nonsensical threat. You know, when the laws of Montana and the laws of America are very clear, we have a separation of church and state, so it's just not an issue. So making an issue out of it is kind of more preemptive, and it's more to satisfy people's fears than anything else it really accomplishes. And a lot of the proponents just wanted to be telling all the other red states that, look, we're 1 out of 10 also that has similarly passed laws. So it was almost like a badge of honor. Recently also there's been talk about sanctuary cities following the refugee ban that President Trump was trying to enact. So as a follow-up to that, there was also a talk about declaring sanctuary cities. So the big cities like San Diego, in particular Albuquerque is another one in New Mexico. These are the leading cities that are trying to enact sanctuary cities where they can pretty much enforce that the local police, the local jurisdiction that is paid by local taxpayers' money cannot be appropriated by the federal government to do immigration rounding up and deportation activities. So again, since Missoula even has been talking about that, there's been a similar movement in Helena. There was a bill introduced to punish any city in Montana that would even dare to declare themselves a sanctuary city by going ahead and removing state support, state dollars being allocated to that city. So there's a lot of punch and counterpunch kind of going on. It's interesting times that we live in here. So with that, I'd just like to finish and welcome questions.
I'd like to thank my dear friend and colleague for his awesome presentation. One of the things that the posts I also hold that I did not include in the beginning is I'm also a speaker with the Humanities Montana. So I'm a speaker available to all communities in Montana, and I'm a speaker at the public libraries, and I'm a speaker at the high schools. And I started speaking in Montana back in 1975. and I'm still out in the community everywhere with outreach. And yes, the most recent situations and happenings here have been very disturbing. However, as I shared with all my family and friends and students, I said I have full confidence in our American institutions and in our American way of life and democracy. And so I have great hope. Of course, I hope for the best and plan for the worst. That's the strategy we're going with today. And as Jamil shared, the world came here. You know, I had the opportunity over the last couple of years to go to many Montana communities and talk about Islam like I shared with you today. And when I started, there was really no hostility. I was well received. But the last few talks, there was quite a bit of hostility. And that made national and international news. I've been to Trigo, Troy, Libby, Whitefish, Columbia Falls, Helena, Stevensville,
Darby.
Darby. Darby is going to have a chapter in my book.
Nice. A special chapter.
Special chapter for Darby, okay? I went to Belgrade, okay? And I get to lecture at the high schools. Usually, the way I set it up with humanities is I will talk to the high schools in the afternoon, and then I will have an evening talk. Because I insisted that when I go into a community and I bring them perspectives on Islam, I want to talk to the young, and I want to talk to the next generation. So when they go home, they can talk amongst themselves. And I want to comfort you and assure you that, yes, we're having issues, we're having problems, but I'm very confident in our institutions. I've been in Montana 42 years. When 9/11 took place, I had my own business here in Missoula. And I was so concerned. I didn't want to open my email. I did not want to answer the phone. However, the first morning after the news, I was at my store, and many Missoulians came. And you know, like most businesses, you have public space and then you have employees only, and I'm in the back, okay, because I didn't want to see anyone. I was fearful of retaliation. And to the contrary, all my thoughts were incorrect. Missoulians came, insisted to come to the back and give me a hug and tell me, Sam, we love you. We love your family. We hope everything is okay. And I also have a friend, he's my cowboy friend. His name is Wade, and when we travel, I'm Wyatt. Okay. But nobody believes that. Like, okay, all right, I help him coach baseball. I've coached baseball. I've coached basketball with Kiwanis. And all those Missoulians came, and my cowboy friend is also an under-sheriff. And he called me and said, Samir, don't worry, we have an extra patrol car watching your store. You can call us if anything, if you feel threatened. These are the Montanans I love and I grew up with. And both principals from the schools where my kids attended called me. Mr. Bittar, we're keeping an eye for your kids. So the community came around us with love. The community knows us for who we are. The problem here is all the fear and the rhetoric and the ignorance. All of a sudden, like Jamil researched, I've been here 42 years, and when I came to Havre, Montana in 1974, I met Muslims there who spent their whole life there. Okay? In fact, one of them comes from the family who erected the first mosque in North Dakota. Okay? However, Darby was a big challenge. I was slated to speak at the high school and then later at the public library. However, the community came out and said, no, we don't want anyone to come here and speak about Islam. Which, of course, our American institutions and our American way of life and the way we are principled came to light. ACLU came up and said, no, you can't. This is against the First Amendment. And it made national news, okay? And yes, I was also interviewed by Associated Press, and it is unbelievable to tell other people that here I am in Missoula, Montana, okay? There's no record of me or anyone else here over the years that happened to be Muslim. However, after Darby happened, AP, Associated Press, wanted to interview Samir, and the journalist, the reporter, came from Chicago. The videographer came from New York. The photographer came from Atlanta. And they were here in Missoula, Montana. And I said, oh, this must be very special. You all came this big distance. They go, you guys are making national news.
For all the wrong reasons.
Yes, you took the words out of my mouth. I said, that's not the coverage we wanted. Montana is a great place, and we will work through these things. And I will close with this and then open for questions. Again, when the situation became hostile, okay, I participate in many interfaith dialogue. Okay, I'm very active. And all the liberals and good people of Missoula, whether they were faculty, retired faculty, staff, community members, came together, okay, and collectively we started the group Salam. And Salam next week will be holding its second annual Celebrate Islam Week, to which I would like to invite all of you. We have activities all week. On Monday, it starts with a banquet. You can get online and buy tickets. And yes, Jamil and I will be cooking Sunday afternoon. Okay. I heard he's cooking, so I said, can I come and help you? Okay. And you can see how our...
He's going to cut all of the onions for me.
So our community has always supported us. You know, when I had my business, I finally opened my emails, and there were emails from friends inquiring how we are and how we're doing and if we need anything. Yes, we're having issues. Yes, these are controversial and very, very, really divisive issues. I just ask everyone to be informed and to formulate your own opinion. Okay? The media is very biased. Here is my experience with the media. Okay? I have always expressed my interest in running for public office when I retired from teaching. However, my experience with the media and Darby has put some question marks on that. Okay? My phone was off the hook all the time from all the media that wanted to cover Darby. And I can tell you with all confidence, the minute we resolved the issue and there was no conflict, the media was not interested anymore. No one wanted to call, no one wanted to interview. All they're interested in is bringing you bad news. And as far as Muslims, I've done research. 85% of what the media puts out about Muslims is negative. And last but not least, with all the love and respect, any American who has an issue and has Islamophobia is not an American. because Islamophobia is a misnomer. It is pure prejudice. That's the other thing I discovered when I visited all these little communities. Perhaps they didn't know much about Islam, but what made me more disheartened, they are not really informed as what it is to be an American and what our principles are. They always ask me when I go, are you Islamist? To which I answer, the only ist I am is a constitutionalist. And if you all are like me, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Because it's purely un-American. Contradicts all our principles as set forth by Thomas Jefferson, who had his own copy of the Quran, and he categorized it in his library under this section of jurisprudence. With that, I will close, and hopefully we can answer your questions. We have a microphone here.
There's one at the back, but if you're loud enough, we should be able to hear, and then we can repeat the question back to others.
I can bring you the mic. Questions? Maybe we should have incentives.
I've got a question.
All right, Khadija, go for it.
So with all the anti-Islamic sentiment and anti-Muslim sentiment, how would you suggest non-Muslims be allies towards Muslims in our community to change the face that is put on by the media, I guess?
So Samir and I have both been highly involved with Salam, like you said, like we said earlier, and that's been a direct response for us as Muslims, which we feel is important, that if there's a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment going on, it's kind of wrong just for the non-Muslims to be standing up and defending us and our religion when they're not really part of the religion. While we very much appreciate the support we're getting, I think it's important that we as Muslims also stand up. But as part of that, the Salam group and others around us have been having workshops. Salam does workshops every Friday evening, specifically to address this. And I in particular just came back from Whitefish, where we had a meeting last Saturday. We drove up there and came back one day, but we had a 2-hour meeting with Love Lives Here. It's a group up in Whitefish that is trying to combat the white nationalist movement that's kind of spreading up there, and the kind of hatred that's spreading there. And they're trying to ask us, okay, how do we collaborate and how do we fight this thing together? So we're trying to work together. We're trying to tell them, okay, we can educate you about Islam. We can talk to you about the things that we're facing. This is how we're trying to stand up, and basically what it is don't be afraid. There's a lot of fear from non-Muslims that we don't know enough about Islam, therefore we can't speak about it. We don't know what to say. We don't know whether it's the right thing, so we don't know whether we're going to make it worse. But I think the best thing is just to stand up and speak what's on your mind. It's kind of like being in a school where you're being bullied. If you don't stand up against the bully, you're going to get bullied forever and ever. And that's the kind of way that I felt personally, is that, if we don't stand up and say something, we vacate the airspace, we vacate the airwaves, we vacate the discussion to those who are spreading lies. And so if we don't speak out, then there's only one narrative that's out there. And that narrative is pretty pervasive. If you ever listen to, there's the obvious candidate, Fox News. There's also all of the AM radio stations. Probably of the radio stations, in AM, about 90% of them are going to be anti-Muslim, anti-refugee, anti-this, anti-that. So, and that's unfortunately the one source of news and information that a lot of people in the rural areas listen to. They're not really listening to anything else other than you know, driving down the highway in a pickup truck and they've got Rush Limbaugh on, or they've got G. Gordon Liddy, they've got someone else on, and that's what they listen. So their news information is very one-sided.
That's a very good question. Jamil touched on what we as a community are doing, and that is we are educating our fellow community members because fear is really the enemy, and we fear what we don't know. So we need knowledge, and knowledge is light, and we can only overcome this darkness by light. Now, how do you support a Muslim community member? We have teachings, okay, and we do role play, and we share with the community how to be helpful. These days, given the current atmosphere and rhetoric, we do need, as Americans, what we call bystander intervention. We can no longer look at racism and turn our head. We have to stand up for who we are and what we stand for and take a position. So, in a situation which happens often where, and this right now we're talking about Muslims, but there are many victims that aren't. Okay, Muslims are just the latest group in this cycle, okay? And what we recommend is, and I will show,
Oh, Khadija has the other mic.
so let's say Khadija is here, okay, and Jamil is there, and I'm the bystander. And Jamil is just throwing some racial slur at her. This is what I'm gonna do. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
This is how you diffuse the situation. You do not confront the aggressor. No. You sit next to the person who is being railroaded and start the conversation. That's going to freeze him. Because he wanted to be racist towards her, not me. And after all, we're all Americans. That will diffuse the situation. Because that person is used to doing what he's doing and nobody doing anything. We're all responsible. What happens in a society is what a society allows. And we are all part of it. And this has been in use now since the situation got really hostile. We shared with you some of my past experiences. I can share with you experiences just recent. Okay? Now, all of a sudden, I've been here 42 years. All of a sudden, I get pulled over. I've held the Montana driver's license since 1976. I don't have a single moving violation. I've been here all these years, never got pulled over. All of a sudden, I'm getting pulled over. And then after they pull me over, of course, they see my, you know who I am, they go, sorry, professor. All of a sudden, people come up and ask me, where are you from? Let me tell you, that's very offensive. That's basically saying I don't belong. So all these little things that I call diet racism, we have to have everybody pitch in and be the Americans we're supposed to be. You know, I went up to Paulson to give a talk, and my wife came with me. I was giving the talk in the afternoon at the public library, and in the evening I was giving the talk at church. I have a habit of going to wherever I go early. I grew up under occupation. I scope the place where I'm going to be. I know where all the exits are. Okay? It's just something I grew up with. I grew up under occupation. So we were in the library early. And I was sitting not where the speaker would be, amongst the people. These are the words I heard from my fellow Americans. At the time, they didn't realize that I was the speaker because my wife is as white as milk. This is what they said. Speaker is very lucky. I can't bring a gun to the library. It's very, very, very disheartening. My wife was getting very nervous. The host said, the speaker is going to share with us about Islam. And he already told us he's not here to debate anything. So if any of you wish to debate, leave now. And I told them, debate is something between proponents who are very well versed in the subject matter. And I'm sorry to say, most of you are ignorant when it comes to Islam. So debate is not applicable. Only to hear, to get up, I'm a veteran. I can debate anything I want. Kick away the speaker. At that time, my wife walked out to the corridor. And I followed her, and she goes, Samir, what are we going to do? I said, the host is going to call the police. This is America. We have laws. The police came, removed all these individuals from the crowd. Last week, my wife asks me, Samir, where is your passport? And I go, what's up with you? You're asking about my passport. She goes, well, I'm reading all this. They say the spouse of someone like you should know where her husband's passport is. We talk in general terms, but it's people's lives. You know, I've been here 42 years. My mom is 86. I wish to go home and visit my mom. However, I'm not willing to take the chance to leave America because I might not be able to come back. I never fathomed or dreamed my problem would come from my home. See how it touches us? I want to go see my mother.
Just trying to get as many folks' questions in as we can.
You have plenty of time.
There's got to be some burning questions out there.
There are no bad questions.
Yes, I mean, we're not here to filter any questions or have you guys write questions down on a piece of paper, so here's your chance to hit us directly.
Yes, sir. What's the status of soft landing right now? Do they have more families coming, or are they on hold, or?
So for those of you at the back, he's asking what's the status of soft landing vis-a-vis more refugees being allowed into the country. And as you all well know, the travel ban was cut down by the states, by the courts rather. The refugee numbers are totally under the control of the federal government. So if they want to cut down the number of refugees they are allowing in, they have that right. So we are still seeing some refugees coming on in, but how many more will come in is highly unknown quantity. So from the countries that were affected, we are still seeing one or two more still being allowed, especially since Iraq was taken off that list. So we had a recent family from Iraq come in. How many more come in and from where they come in, we have no idea. But Soft Landing is still a very viable organization. They have not got the 503c3 status yet. So they are an informal NGO. They do have a board, and they have a very, very active group of volunteers. They've probably got more volunteers and donations than they know what to do with. So they have a very good support base. This is another big question that I keep hearing from the opponents, that Missoula doesn't have enough volunteers to take care of them, and they're just going to be here sucking away welfare money, and why aren't we taking care of the homeless and the veterans and this and that, you know. But there's a group of volunteers locally here who is actively helping each and every family.
Yes, they're still trying to set up the IRC office. At one time, they were going to have an IRC executive here, but because of the size of the state and, as Jamil mentioned, not knowing how many will actually be resettled here, they're going to currently run through the IRC office in Utah.
But they
they're
do have a
still
local
building.
presence.
Yes, they'll have a local presence, but they're
They do
still
have one.
building. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, one at the back.
Do you believe the anti-Muslim sentiment is getting much worse in Missoula and maybe even the whole state of Montana, or do you think it's actually becoming more positive?
Well, Missoula, as all of you guys know, you know, there's a bumper sticker that says Missoula's 50 miles from Montana. And we're kind of a small liberal oasis, but as soon as you get outside city boundaries, you're in real Montana. So we've lived here long enough to not fool ourselves that living in Missoula means that we're living in what the rest of Montana thinks and feels. We're smart enough, I think, to realize that this is still a very red state. And conservative values are very strong here. Rural values are very strong, which traditionally has not been in odds with other religions. It's been very very welcoming before, but I think, you know, overall it started taking a different tack. I've been noticing since Obama got elected. I mean, there was a lot of noise made about his middle name being Hussein. You know, that was repeated again and again, that, you know, he is partly Muslim, or he is a Muslim, he's hiding, you know. So that's been used negatively, politically, I would say, to curry the anti-Islamic thing and trying to kind of find a penetration through his armor. But it's really gotten traction, I felt, in the last 2-3 years. Act for America has been a group which is a very strong anti-Muslim group. There's Jihad Watch, there's Anti-Refugee Watch, there's whole bunches of blog sites, you know, internet sites. A lot of them are from the East Coast. They're not actually local. There are a lot of them nationally are getting the set of instructions, if you will, from the East Coast, and they're actively recruiting local chapters and local folks to kind of carry the message. And in rural Montana, I think especially, they found fertile ground, and so the seeds have germinated. And once the seeds germinate and that gets into people's minds, it's very difficult to confront. So we're facing an uphill battle. We've been trying to sit down one-on-one with some of these groups and try and say, okay, you know, we've been in Montana, we know you're not racist. There's levels of racism, I guess I would say, you know, and maybe some of them are actually racist, although when You confront them about that, they bristle, they say, no, we're not racist. Well, are you anti-Muslim? No, we're not anti-Muslim. Then. So what are you? You know, so that discussion just goes round and round, and there's really no good end result other than they have their views, we have our views. We're trying to figure out how can we bridge that gap. Is there a gap that we can even bridge? Sometimes there isn't, and we're all right with that. You know, you have your views, we have our views. But the ways we can confront it is just, I've always felt, in character. We've been here for so many years. They've known us before this crisis happened. We haven't changed. We're not waiting, you know, we don't have an earpiece in our ear waiting for some set of instructions from the Middle East to blow ourselves up or do something bad, as the opponents keep thinking, you know, that we're some kind of stealth group that's been set out in advance for the invading hordes that are coming afterwards, you know, that upon set of instructions, hit button. You know, we are who we are. I mean, if our character doesn't speak for ourselves, I don't know what does. But as Samir pointed out many times, you know, look at Islam, don't look at Muslims. Muslims are, we are our own worst enemies, right? You just have to look at ISIS, you just have to look at Al-Qaeda, you just have to look at all of the bad things that go on. And so the opposition uses that, you know. I mean, there's, on any given day on the internet, you can find negative stuff. And that's what they splash on their websites. Such and such thing happened in Somalia, you know, that beheading happened in Saudi Arabia, this happened there, that. Well, on any given day, just in the United States, I can troll the newspapers and I can find all kinds of headlines. It's not Christian person did that, it's never labeled that, but who are these people? Are they not Christian people committing rapes, fraud, murder, etc.? So it's how you phrase it, right? And as Muslims, we've always, from the very beginning, hated the word Islamic terrorism. They're terrorists. First and foremost, they're using Islam for their own political misdeeds and trying to gain the support of other Muslims by using that. But they're terrorists. And these terrorists are terrorizing fellow Muslims way more than non-Muslims. You know, they're blowing themselves up in Turkey and Pakistan and all these, and killing, you know, thousands of people. It doesn't get reported, or if it does, it's in the 10th page in a small paragraph. But, you know, the stuff that you read in the front page is obviously, you know, well, we all know what happens there. So, you know, the anti-Muslims thing is going to take a long time. I don't see this waning down anytime soon. It was used for great political gain. The Trump administration used that, I think, tremendously well. Strategically, they were able to reach a whole audience of rural America that kind of, along with other issues, you know, the anti-Mexican, anti-immigration, anti-Muslim, anti-this ever. Unemployment was supposed to be the big thing, right? Jobs. But, you know, kind of jobs has kind of taken a second burner to the hot issue buttons that I think appeals to a lot of rural America. You know, there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of fear that our mills have closed, our livelihood is changing, our jobs are going away. And I think we can all agree that fear for personal jobs and our kids and their livelihoods is a common thing. It isn't just rural white Christian Americans that have that fear. It's everyone. Everyone has that fear. So I think if you can bridge that gap and say these fears are common, they don't just belong to one group. African Americans, Mexicans, you know, Muslims, everyone has those fears about how can we live our lives here? What's our future going to be? You know, are there going to be jobs? How are our kids going to get educated? Will our kids have jobs? You know, will they pay the same amount as we had? These are common fears. They're not just fears that white Americans have. These are common fears, but politically, that fear was used to tremendous success. I mean, man, I could never believe that he would have so much success, but he did. And now, you know, whether he can deliver on those promises, that's a different thing, you know. So we're kind of seeing, it's one thing to campaign, it's another thing to rule.
Excellent. Thank you for asking that question. And I'm going to give you real data, okay? When I lecture, just like I say, if you want to understand Islam, please study Islam, not Muslims, because Muslims vary. Okay. I also say, if you want to know what it feels like for a Muslim in your community, then put yourself in their shoes. Okay? And I had 2 students that were at my lecture, and the following week came to me and said, Professor Bitar, I want to take the challenge you gave us. How do I do it? I said, okay, for the male, just put a Muslim cap on. And for the female, again, put your headwear on, and then go out. And we did this here on the campus of the University of Montana. And to follow up what Jamil said, I always say, look, our university is the liberal hub, and the liberalism drops proportionally to the radial distance you go away from campus. Okay? You don't have to go farther than Alberton. Okay? So I said, just go and do it. So the male put on his cap. Okay, I teach the class at noon. Okay, when he came in the classroom, he was so disturbed and upset from the experience from 8 to noon as a Muslim on the University of Montana campus. He went to his first class. No one would sit next to him. The same students that were in class with him the day before. When he put that cap on, no one sat next to him. There was a lot more that he talked about. And then the female experienced the same thing he experienced. She got a lot more talk while she's walking on the oval. Okay? Now, we sat and documented what we experienced. The Kaiman came and interviewed us. They never published the article. Now you have your answer. Yes. That's why we need bystander intervention. And while I say that, I'm very happy and proud to say that in my 42 years in Montana, I've faced many situations. However, my fellow Montanans always stood up with me. Always. In Havre, my roommate would come up and say, you have a problem with Samir. You have a problem with all of us. And that's been all these years. And that's why I say I have full confidence in our American ways and principles and our American institutions. I mentioned the ban, and I didn't say much good about it because it is bad altogether. However, the hope emanates from that, because the minute that went into place, our judicial branch came into place and said, no, that's our democracy in action. So we hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Just to kind of follow up on your question, what we're living in is very interesting times in the sense that along with the anti-Muslim rhetoric, the anti-refugee rhetoric, what it's given is a lot of cause for various groups across the spectrum to now find common ground. So the LBGT folks, the pro-Latino, the pro-sanctuary group, the groups that are trying to fight bullying, groups that are trying to empower the minorities, stand up for social justice. There's a coalescing of all of these groups across the spectrum because they're finding common ground. That if one group is being picked on today, it's going to be the next group's turn tomorrow. So if we band together, there's going to be a lot more strength in numbers. And so for me personally, that's been really heartening to see, is that although there's probably no more than a handful of permanent Muslim families here, there's a huge number of other groups and associations that are rallying not only around this cause, but so many other causes. And it's like, it seems to be like all hands on deck right now. Time for a few more.
One more.
Before they kick us out.
One more? Well, thank you very much. And there's only a few of us, so you can find us and write. Okay, I'm on the list, samir.pitar@umontana.edu. Please feel free to write me, and this is a promise, I will answer you, definitely. Thank you very much for being with us. May God bless you.